welcome back to RAWring Twenties Podcast. Today we have on with us Raquelle Mantra from Your Own Magic Podcast, who we are so excited to have. We were just gushing about the full moon that's going on. We have so many questions for her we're going to talk all about spirituality, what that means, all that good stuff. Hi Raquelle, thanks for being here.
I am seriously so in love with both of your energies, like so beaming and smiling. It's just, you've made my day.
Oh my God, her energy's making mine.
I love this. Okay, wait, this is RAWring Twenties. How old are both of you?
I'm 25 and Brenda, as we said, is an Aquarius. She's about to be 25.
Oh my God.
Yes. So yeah, but that's part of my next question for you, Raquelle. I would love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us just a little bit about you, who you are, where you're from, and how old are you, since it is the RAWring Twenties podcast.
RAWring Twenties. This time last year, I was just finishing up my 20s. I just turned 30 in August, and it really felt so different that second. I was like, oh, it's gonna be nothing, whatever. Nope. Something shifted. I don't know what it was, but I gotta tell you, the 20s, beautiful time, and especially the late 20s. There's something, because you've been through your early 20s, you know what that's like. I'm so excited for whatever is about to come for you, but I realize as well, consciously, we're all, no matter the age, because I have friends that are 22, and then I also have friends that are 42. It really is just more of like a soul connection than an actual physical age connection than anything else. But who am I? Well, my name's Raquelle. I have a hard time. Someone asked me this yesterday when I was on an interview. I don't know how to label myself because I don't consider myself a spiritual teacher. And I emphasize this. I even put on my bio recently. I'm like, not a spiritual teacher, but more of a soul sister on this journey with you, discovering everything that excites me as well throughout the process of just being human and learning to love the human, along with understanding what spirituality is all about.
Yes. Oh my God. I'm glad that you brought up the thing about the age and like turning 30 and moving into your late 20s, because I mean, that's what this whole podcast is about, being in your 20s, and the early 20s are so crazy. And and we have this hilarious thing that happened on my 25th birthday. Brenda asked me like, because I'm a very optimistic person. I'm usually quite happy and bubbly. And Brenda asked me, she's like, Julia, what do you think about being 25? And my answer was like, it's hard.
That was it.
So out of character for me, but I think we're shifting in the later.
Oh, yeah. Wait, no. Okay, have you heard of Saturn Return yet?
Oh yes, we were just talking to Maren Altman all about Saturn Return.
Maren. She was one of the people that came to mind when I was talking about the different ages. She's 22. And I'm like, Maren, you're not 22.
And she's
you're like 222.
No, she's like 722.
Yeah, for real.
70 lives. Like, she's fine.
She's unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. She came to both of my retreats, and there was something about her. I didn't know what it was exactly. Couldn't pinpoint it. And now seeing where she's gone with what her magic is, it makes all the sense in the world to me. All the sense in the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. It is so funny because I remember that night, and I don't know why, just because of our friendship, I wanted to document with what Julia was talking about. I was like, I want to document her turning 25 right at midnight. And it was just the most unexpected response, but I do definitely think the energy has shifted since that moment. This is all about you today, Raquelle.
Wait, I'm curious though, what energy, like because of the moon?
I was going through a lot of around my birthday, I was going through a lot of stuff. I had just gone through a really hard breakup. And just like this early 20s is so what we talk about on this show all the time, of like feeling like you need to have your career figured out, feeling like you need to have your relationship figured out, where you're living, and like blah, blah. And it was just a time in my life, like at that birthday, that I was my world had kind of exploded. Mm-hmm. And of course, at the time, it felt so heavy and so hard. But now, 6 months later, I am able to look back and be like, wow, like totally happened for a reason. Like so grateful for the path that it's put me on. I mean, we could spend the whole episode talking about that, but yeah.
I love hearing this though. I really do. The chaos is so needed. The chaos and the storm and what feels like the dark night of the soul is so needed for our growth. And when I was 25, really, it was really 27 that it really hit. But, that's when a lot of chaos started to happen. And it happens at a different age for everybody. But Saturn Return, I don't know one person, even people that aren't interested in spirituality, which a lot of my friends are not, they still, for whatever reason, around that time, something crazy happens. A lot of different, I don't like to say tests, but it feels like it's a test. It's a challenge, but you learn a lot and you grow immensely.
Oh, I can't wait for it.
I know, I just got the chills, I'm not gonna lie. But anyway, let's start with the big question. So what does spirituality mean to you?
Spirituality reminds me that I am more than this physical body, that I am connected to something that I would say is greater than me, but also me. And that connects me with you two. And that connects me with this microphone, the trees that are in front of me, that connects me with everybody, but also connects me with something within myself that has been a source of energy for as long as Earth has been around, as long as the universe has been around. And it brings me home.
Oh, I love that answer. I feel like I always have a hard time like vocabularizing, that's not even a word, but like putting in
girl, we get you.
Like what it means to me, because I identify as a spiritual person, and like people ask me like, what does that mean? And I'm like, I don't know, like you're connected to like your things are bigger than you, but like not necessarily maybe a god, I don't know, but like I feel like I never know like how to say it, but that was just beautifully put. Curious, Raquelle, what led you on your journey to spirituality and like finding all these practices that you now have so much put your life into?
You know how everybody talks about awakening, right? This is a big, fun term that people love to use. And I loved using that word, and I still do. And it's almost like I feel as though I'm in an episode of awakening from awakening, if that makes sense, which is such an interesting roundabout way. But when I was it was 2013 when I began my awakening, and I was 23, and I had a fiance. We're still friends. Kindest man I've ever known. He's amazing, but I just had this inner knowing that I needed to do something for myself. I wasn't ready to get married. I also was in a job which was a dream job in the entertainment industry. I dreamt of a job like this my entire life, and I just had this inner feeling, this inner voice, this inner knowing that this was not for me. I didn't know why, but something just didn't feel right. Something felt off. I never thought about, I was pretty nihilistic in my perspective with everything in the world at that time, because I left the Mormon church, and I realized that I didn't want to have any dogmatic practice in my life whatsoever. So instead, I just wanted to feel free. And I would go to church for his family from time to time, a Christian church, but I just couldn't get involved. However, I felt I couldn't understand what this inner voice, this inner feeling was. I'm calling it inner voice now because I'm aware. But at that time, I didn't know. There was just a resistance within my gut. And I loved him as a person, but I also knew we weren't supposed to be together anymore. And that was really hard to come to terms with. And, I just had to leave this world that I knew. I went, that I worked so hard in my university for, going to USC for wanting to be in entertainment, And for whatever reason, I followed that, and I quit my job, and I was actually extremely into health at the time. I was practicing yoga. I remember I hated yoga, but I kept going and I didn't know why. And then it was because of the Shavasana. The Shavasana gave me a high, which became my new vice in a sense, because I quit smoking, I quit drinking, I quit all of these things that were my vice to escape for myself. And yoga just gave me that high that I guess I was looking for. And then there was something I'm sure you both have been to a yoga class where you are in New York, right? You're in New York. Yeah, and I'm sure the yoga teachers are something about just grounding and centering when they get to that space. Perhaps their human is wild and crazy, wonderful, but when you show up, you know, you usually show up centered in some way. And there was something that I felt so called to witnessing them. So I decided to fly off to Bali to do yoga teacher training. And long story short, a year after that Bali trip, I kept hearing her call, and I decided, you know what? I am just going to, this is when I left my job. Actually, I didn't leave my job till after that. Nope. I had already left my job. Just kidding. But yeah, so 2000, and not that the dates matter, but yeah, 2016, I flew off to Bali and I stayed there for 3 years, traveling around solo traveling all by myself. It felt pretty isolating, but I was so deep in this whole spiritual self-discovery and learning the new age stuff and all the different forms of awakening and blah. It was so fun and magical and lovely, but at the same time, I didn't realize that I also was deeply depressed because I didn't become aware of that quite yet until later on when the Saturn return really hit. And that is when spirituality had a different message for me. And the messaging behind spirituality basically is just what saved my life and made me realize that I'm here for a reason, for a purpose. Even if at this time it doesn't feel like it, I have to stick around. And so now spirituality has a completely different meaning, though I still love the witchy stuff, the new age stuff, the astrology. Like Marin's my astrology girl, you know, I still love all that. But for me, spirituality, and I love aliens, I love 5D, 3D. You know, we talk all about this on the podcast, but for me, spirituality personally is not at all loud. It's so deeply personal because it reminds me why I'm here and why I'm home and why I need to stay.
Wow. That was so beautifully put. Thank you for giving us such a detailed, like well-rounded view of your mind and your heart and your experiences. I think our listeners are going to be really impacted already in just these first few minutes. And something that really stood out to me was, how did you learn to trust that gut feeling and that intuition?
Same question, Brenda. I had the same.
Because I feel like so often we might like get a thought and not be able to distinguish what's this like maybe unproductive thought versus real intuition. And how did you, what was the turning point that made you actually make the decision, you know?
Ooh, see, when I first started hearing this inner voice again, I was not aware at all. I was reading a lot about it, especially through Eckhart Tolle's books. And it became so abundantly clear that this feeling, this resistance inside of me was exactly the nature he was speaking of. And we all always hear this inner whisper and voice that everybody hears it, that lets you know, maybe not the best idea. You have this inner reaction. You might feel it in your heart, you might feel it in your gut. And it's so subtle. And it's harder to hear through the noise, especially if you're always on your phone, which there's nothing to shame, because honestly, technology is an amazing way to stay connected and learn more about you. But when you feed all of the noise and continue to receive all these dopamine hits, sometimes that inner voice becomes quieter and quieter. So anybody that is really trying to decide and decipher especially if you're making a big decision, it's not something you have to do 24/7 to become obsessed with, but let's say you're making a big decision, I highly recommend turning off the phone for a bit, just taking some time in silence, and then you'll ask yourself your question, and everybody has that inner knowing. You just know. I know that the answer is so simple, but it's so true. And you just trust in that knowing that tells you this is it. Even if it feels so confusing, then perhaps I call it the purging write something down, but keep the noise away, just write something, purge out all the other thoughts. You want to just, purge, get rid of everything that feels like clutter inside. And that is when that little voice is always there, and it's going to speak to you. Just sometimes we really need to quiet the noise, which can be really hard in a big city. Even you guys have a harder experience doing that in the big city, but guess what? It's so possible. And
No, that's so helpful, and such an interesting and cool way to put it. And even you saying those things, I like to think I'm fairly introspective, and honestly, our podcast, and we do some solo episodes ourselves, so we force ourselves together to have these difficult conversations and ask questions. But I realize now more than ever on my own time, there is so much noise. The first thing I do when I wake up, I'm like doing our podcast work at like 6 a.m, not because I think I am supposed to. It's just like you can't shut off the noise, or this like desire to want to achieve and excel and push past, all these boundaries that, all these things that you set for yourself. So it is, for wanting that voice to be louder and stronger, and really wanting to be so connected to what you actually believe, like you have to be super intentional about that. And it is hard.
Absolutely. You have to set the intention to do that. And I think the biggest barrier, to be honest, is just allowing yourself to turn off the noise and telling your mind to, because I sometimes will have a hard time, especially if it stacks and stacks and stacks on top of each other. There are so many layers to like just convincing your mind that it's okay to be silent and turn it all off. I think the biggest barrier is your mind, always.
100%. Yeah.
And I love, in your story, which we talked about before, of like, it can be so scary, I think, for a lot of us around this age to feel like, oh, well, I went to university for this thing, or I've been wanting this my whole life, and like now it changes, or something feels off, or something doesn't feel right. And like, that's so scary to have to, I think, have that conversation with yourself of like, okay, yeah, maybe you did go to college for this for 4 years. Maybe you did want this your whole life, but maybe now it's different. And that, I think, is so scary. And I see so many of our friends coming up against that because you can't really prepare for it. And like, it's so scary. But I over and over, we get to hear, which is, why I'm so grateful for this podcast. We get to hear stories from women who have had that experience and have come out on the other side, and they're like, it was supposed to happen. It's better that way.
Exactly. It's like everything that you experience, even what you thought in your mind the entire time, what you envisioned for yourself, it led you to where you are meant or destined to be. Even though I feel like we always have other options, regardless, we're being led somewhere, even if it feels like we are just super low at some points. Regardless, we're going to end up somewhere where we couldn't even fathom before. Also, it's not like I thought about having a podcast in 2010 and 2012 and 2013. I didn't even listen to them till 2015, which is early for a podcast listener. But yeah, it's everything. I look back and I'm like, all of those experiences before I even had the awakening, it all collectively makes a world of sense of what I'm doing now.
I love that. Yeah. And we talk a lot about, especially recently through Julia's experiences in year 25, and just all different things that we've experienced in our own awakenings, just how the more times that we see and believe, this really did happen for a reason, the more we're able to, moving forward, make sense of, okay, this might not make sense right now, but it's for a reason. This is happening for me. And that just, I think, brings us some inner peace when you feel like things aren't in our realm of control and all that.
And that is the biggest beauty of spirituality. It's so fun for it and easy for it to become convoluted and complex. But the simplicity behind spirituality, the whole reason why. And it's interesting you guys asked that question as well, because yesterday I went on my Facebook group because I noticed, I went on TikTok for a second first, and I saw all these people talking about spirituality in some way, and I'm like, all beautiful because it's exciting, and everybody's been there, it's so fun, but it's so important to remember how simple it is for your own sanity, for your own ease and peace in your energetic body and in your mind and your heart. That's truly what it's about.
Yeah. Wow. It's nice to hear it simplified. I think sometimes because it's becoming so relevant, I think, more people are opening their eyes to it, and like there's so many different practices and so many wonderful teachers. It can feel in a way like another one of those things that you have to be perfect at, but that's so not what it's about.
Exactly. There's no spiritual standard whatsoever. And there was a period where I was even trying to live this picture perfect spiritual existence. When that is so, the irony in that, it's so, there's no such thing. Everybody really can make it as they feel, because that's the exact experience. Is how do you feel? Follow that light, follow that passion, follow those inner whispers. And how I feel and my inner whispers are going to be completely different than what both of you are, because if we want to take it there, source, God, universe wants to experience it all. And so there's going to be a variety of different colors. And also that doesn't mean people that are spiritual are more spiritual than people that aren't practicing spirituality. That's another thing that is a huge key to remember too.
Oh, I do want to come back to that, but first I want to go back to kind of like this noise thing. You actually wrote this in a post like a long time ago, like maybe a year or two ago. But you wrote, "What we do when no one is looking influences our frequency the most." And that really stopped me because, kind of like we mentioned before, there's like all of this noise. And I think so many of us, especially at this age, at this time, it's so much about like living for like the highlight reel, what you can post on Instagram, how you look to others, like what accomplishment you could post about, what vacation you can post about. And it's so noisy. So why is doing the work that you can't post about on Instagram really so important? How much does that really like affect us?
Oh my. So you know what I wish that I wrote as well with that? I wish that I wrote what if, because instead of like pose it as a question, because it's like, what if what you are doing when basically no one's watching is what's really going to be influencing your frequency the most. And by the way, when I say frequency, I've had a whole entire episode to spiel the quantum physics of it, but basically,
yeah, go into this because it was my next question for you anyway. So like you can go into frequency.
Perfect. I realized, because a lot of people are like, what the hell are they talking about? Frequency.
Yeah, please.
So frequency, this behind me, is this a video visual one, or is this going to be audio?
It's
okay,
both.
perfect. So this wall has an energy, right? It's actually emitting a frequency at a certain rate. And now, so we don't see it exactly, but it's vibrating. It's vibrating at a rate and oscillating at a rate. And that oscillation, that vibration is the frequency. And it's very slow because it's so solid. Our movements are a frequency in some way, but our emotions are extremely sensitive frequencies, not good or bad. I'm not going to label that quite yet, but you know what a high frequency is, because that's pure love. That's love, unconditional love. That's like the highest frequency you can possibly emit and emote. And then, of course, what is associated in the spiritual world these days, or I guess community, is lower frequencies would be like low vibe things like, oh, I'm let's see, what's something that would be a low vibe thing these days?
What would be a low vibe thing?
I know that's a hard thing for me, but maybe emotion wise depressed,
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to say that's good or bad, because in the grand scheme of life, a lot of us are going through maybe a low time, a dark period, and it really does end up leading to something so expansive. And we have to go through that dark period in order to manifest whatever it is in some way to like claim our worth. There's so much to that. And so I never want people to shame their dark period. And that's another beautiful part about just understanding the whole point of spirituality, is because you also have compassion for those dark periods. So I don't want to label anything like that a low vibration, but
it's kind of just like a measure, like a unit of measurement.
It's a unit of measurement. It's the rate of what the energy is. But what really matters is when we're talking about consciousness, because a higher vibrational consciousness is something that is more open-minded, and their perception is so wide open that they can see and feel and perceive beyond the sensical, the senses, the five senses of the world. But their lower vibrations, they might have a little narrow perception of reality. And again, there's nothing right or wrong about that either, because we need that human as well. We need the contrast. We need the contrast for it all. But if you are consciously desiring to expand or raise that vibration, raise that frequency, it's super important to remember what you're doing that you're not showing. Is it performative? Or what are you doing behind the scenes that are actually going to shift and shape you. And it doesn't have to be any spiritual work. It's even like, for example, let's say you're watching, people might consider maybe like reality TV to be a lower vibe, even though I love reality TV. But it's like, are you allowing their emotions to seep through you and alter your reality in their world and their perspective? Or are you witnessing it from entertainment, but standing outside of it as an observer in some way to expand your understanding of the world? You know, it's just all about understanding what in everything that you do, even how you eat and how, just becoming more conscious of it all. So that way you don't ever feel like you are accumulating unconscious emotions. And that's where the pain body comes in. There's a difference between ego and pain body as well. And the ego isn't always so unhealthy. Ego isn't always so harmful. I mean, your ego probably created this podcast, you know, like there were some exciting things that your human wants to experience some things because your soul came here to experience certain things. Nothing wrong with that. And the mind, the ego, but this is where it's become so controversial in the spiritual space, which is also ironic, right? Like the ego itself is a controversial thing. It's like,
Okay.
but the pain body is often what they really refer to, and that's actually a term coined by Eckhart Tolle, and I just love it because it's basically the accumulations of these unconscious emotions that we just bottle up and we don't keep in, we don't release, and they might influence our unconscious behaviors. So it's about, and it's not like you're going to be conscious about everything, so we literally think 100,000 or more random thoughts every hour or whatever. I don't know. That's an exaggeration, but
a shit ton.
So yeah, but it's so, those who are exceptionally perceptive have been able to raise that frequency to a sense where it's allowed them more compassion for not only others, but themselves and their world. And that's the power and the peace of raising the vibration, the frequency, which is a very lofty, fun term in the spiritual space now too.
Also, I know you're itching to say something, Brenda, but on that note, Dr. Joe Dispenza just put out like a graph of like the frequencies, how, like what the frequencies look like per emotion. So if anyone is interested, go to his Instagram, because you could see love is like really, really fast and like depression is like really slow, and it's cool to see it in like a graph.
I would love to see that. Oh my God,
it's on his Instagram.
Ooh, very cool.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Brenda, what are you going to say?
No, that's fine. Yeah, it was just honestly about the whole, how you basically said in all of those beautiful words that perception is so powerful, and that having this knowledge and being connected to yourself, really knowing what you're thinking, really knowing what you're feeling, having this depth with spirituality and giving you that perception, because I'm thinking about so many moments where people feel, as opposed to treating themselves with compassion in dark moments, really, really look inward in a way where they blame themselves and ask things like, what's wrong with me? I'm not like this. How can I be doing these things? And I just think about how much spirituality can play a role in having such a different perspective, like you said, and also being so much kinder to others, because I know that through my own experiences, I've seen what like self-destruction can do versus self-compassion. And I know for a fact that I carry myself throughout the world differently because I know what both periods are like, and because I want to, I guess, model the way for others that compassion really does win. Love does win, just like you said. So it's so interesting to note all of these things. And I just hope and wish and I'm excited that people are opening their hearts more to things like this, myself included. I feel like I've opened my eyes to all of these things over the past few years, months, even more so. And I really hope that people continue to be open to it, because it really can change the way we carry ourselves and think.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And one thing I love about last year, 2020, is that it gave, they call it 2020, the year of more clarity and vision. Who would have thought that it gave us that kind of clarity, right? Mm-hmm. And allowed us to see a lot of stuff, especially face a lot of stuff when we were in these four walls. Mm-hmm. Like, it's so wild to remember that time and look back, and that even altered my perception of reality in another way. And that's why I talk about awaken from awakening, because it really was 2020 that did this, because it made me see, well, reflecting back at my past with being in a religion, though I already called it, so I guess I could call it out. I hate, but you know, being in a religion, and if you're Mormon, I'm not saying this about you, but at the exact ward I was in, exact church I was in, felt like they wanted us to see it in this one perspective of reality, that this church was true. I had to always say that whenever I made my testimony, and this was the only version of reality. And then as I've been navigating the spiritual space, it started to navigate towards that as well, where it's like, well, if you don't see it this way like we all see it, then you're not woke enough, then you're not spiritual enough, then you're not. And I altered my perception again. I'm like, everything that we're all experiencing is so part of our own experience, and it's so beautiful and good, and to have compassion for that. And when you understand where everybody else's perspectives are and their consciousness may be, you can have more compassion for where they're at too, even if they trigger you. I have certain triggers. I have certain people that might, you know, I might feel like, oh my gosh, I can't, for example, the last president. But then I've learned how to finally find a place in my heart to see. It's still hard. And I even talked about it on my podcast. I'm like, I'm not perfect at it. It's still something I'm working with, but I get triggered by him, not so much since he's silent right now, but that heart space and that compassion, understanding that what my heart ended up sharing on that podcast, because I silenced my mind and I ended up just allowing my heart to speak, or just that inner voice to speak. And it just reminded me that he, like everybody else, no matter what your mind might say or portray of him, wants love, which is so hard for the mind to believe.
Yeah.
When it comes to certain people, but when you're in that space, I could feel it, and I couldn't help but feel that love. And which is so weird. Like my mind is like, why would you feel that love? But then my heart, there's something so powerful about quieting the mind to allow the heart to feel for somebody even like Trump.
Yeah. It's hard. It's certainly hard. But it is true. And we talk about it a lot of like, at the end of the day, you know, we're all running around, like doing this thing, whatever it is that we're doing. And at the end of the day, like we all just want connection. We all just want love. Like it's back to the noise. Like there's so much stuff. And like, really, it's kind of just these like two simple things that are inherently intertwined.
At the core.
Yeah.
It's something for a psychologist, of course, to be like, well, he has been doing this, so that makes him, do you know the dark triad or whatever, like Machiavellian and psychopath.
Oh yeah.
Sociopathic. Yeah. So it makes him blah, blah, blah. And like, that's of course their mind seeing that. And trust me, psychology, if I ever went back to school, it'd probably be the field I'd go into. I love psychology. I love figuring out how the human works. And one of the things that actually got me into it, have you heard of spiral dynamics?
No.
Oh my God, it's so long. So it would be hard for me to.
Damn, okay, I'll look it up.
I can sum it up super fast. So there's different levels of consciousness that they have discovered. Well, you know, psychological consciousness, this is actually not, it was evolved into something a little more woo-woo, and that was what I ended up connecting with. But ultimately, there's this psychologist, Claire Graves, and these other psychologists who took his work, and they realized, and they decided to put a color on each level of consciousness of evolution. Every human's evolution, from whether it's a human born in the Western world and they are a toddler and they're growing up and evolving, or it's an actual society like a tribe, and they might have the same level of consciousness like a toddler in a more privileged society does, because of the perception of reality they see, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just colored it for the human mind to understand it more easily, which I absolutely love, because I am human too. And so we love to categorize things in that way. But if I could remember, so beige is basically like a baby. I've had a whole episode on this, like 2-hour long episode. I don't know, hour long, but yeah, beige is like a baby. Purple is like a tribe. You know, they all just know each other. They belong to each other. They have the rituals where they might connect with the gods, so they're becoming aware of that. But they begin to develop an ego and an understanding of connection with other humans, like a toddler does. And then they develop. But then there's the red right after that. Some of them might branch off and want to do their own thing because they end up developing a little sense of narcissism. Maybe it's a lower narcissism, but apparently, according to this study, like most everybody has, even if it's a 2, everybody has like a little bit of narcissism. And so this is when that starts to develop, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to do my own thing, go from the tribe. Maybe that was me when I wanted to go on my spiritual journey. I was so selfish at that time. I needed it. But at the same time, I still cared and was of love. And then blue is like, all right, they're back to a group. So no longer individual, they're back to a group, and they are learning how to connect with God, with source together in a more dogmatic sense. So now their perception of the world is, for example, a Mormon church or any church, you know, they're living in this, like, this is the way life is. It's structured in this way to worship God, right? In this way that we worship God. I'm doing this for a reason, you know? And then perhaps some of them might branch from that, and they're like, and they might end up becoming a little nihilistic, atheist, or whatever, or they just want to get into personal development. They might still be slightly religious, but just focus on that. And of course, this is not at all like everybody might be a blend of all of it, right? In some way, shape, or form, but where do you mostly lie? And so orange is known as like the individual, step back into individuality, getting into personal development, getting into some people might be getting into spirituality in a sense, just learning about maybe it's actually conspiracy theories. This is probably a good area for like conspiracy theories, which is another one of my triggers, by the way. And then they might blossom into a green, more heart space, more of love feeling, where everything is like rainbows and butterflies. That's where I was when I flew off to Bali, and everything was just like rainbows and butterflies all the time. And you know, it's almost very hippie, but we're all collectively a group again, all one, all of love, all at peace. We're all together. This is a beautiful world, right? And then from that green, again, back to the individual, they begin to see beyond the love and everything, and they decide to perhaps they create some sort of system to help people see the world another way, or they see beyond just that love and awareness. And you know, does it all this make sense? Because I'm rushing through.
No, it totally makes sense. I feel like you're doing a really good job of explaining it.
Amazing. And then there is, I think the next one is turquoise. After yellow, it's turquoise. Or is it magenta? I can't remember the top colors. The turquoise would definitely probably be like the enlightened being, though. So after they've seen this other beyond the spiritual hippie world, and they're so back to the world, or back to the group from the individual. Now they see the world, they become an enlightened being, and it's like Ram Dass was probably turquoise, or Eckhart Tolle is probably turquoise, or Byron Katie's probably turquoise. Those are the only people that I think. Maybe even teal swan, probably, maybe, or yellow, high yellow. But they see the oneness, they feel the oneness, and they share the oneness in a genuine way. And it's just how, you know, people evolve, and some people might just be chilling at orange. I think the US at this time is very orange.
Yes.
Collectively, like skewing away from the blue a little bit, and maybe even sliding into green, to be honest. I feel like orange might have even been a couple of years ago. Right. But it's so interesting to hear and see how the evolution is. It made a world of sense to me. And I think that gave me compassion for knowing, like, I understand why my family might judge me for my decisions, because they have this perception of reality, and that's okay. And it gave me compassion, and I hope no one's listening.
I think it's great for like kind of like taking a step outside of, like, we talk about this sometimes with like love languages and stuff, of like how like we, you know, you can't expect certain things from certain people. Like there's this chapter in The Little Prince, which is my favorite book, and it's like you can't be mad at the sun for not rising, because the sun is going to rise and set when the sun wants to. And like,
Yes.
you can't be mad at the sun for not rising or setting when you want it to. And like having a little bit of that perspective, that step back of like, people are at where they're at sometimes. And like, you can't force people to be where you want them to be, but it does allow for more compassion when you can see that, both for them and for yourself. So you're not getting angry with yourself of why you can't move them, or like, you know, I just think it's
so beautiful, so perfectly said. Yeah. Like, that is exactly it. Amen. Amen.
It was so beautifully said. And Raquelle, you have given us like so many different things. I feel like our audience is not even going to expect all this stuff, that incredible stuff you're throwing at them. But I'm thinking about a listener who hears these terms thrown around, or who hears spirituality, who hears, you know, maybe things like manifesting, who hears quiet your mind and is like, what sounds good, but how do I get there? Where do I start? What do I do? I want to be there. I admire and respect everyone who's there, but how do I get there? What would you say to them? What would you advise them?
Like the first step.
Take a time to step away and listen within for a moment. And if you don't know exactly what that means, step away from the phone, go in your room, step away from the distractions, close your eyes, and listen to this, whatever whisper might be inside. There might be some thoughts, intrusive thoughts, that decide to come in, and you can just tell them to go away. But when you do eventually come to a space where there is a little bit of peace, even though you will likely still be thinking, which that is perfectly normal and fine, you might end up coming to a space of just a little bit of peace. And when you're there, ask yourself, or remind yourself, or bring to, in a vision, depending on if you're a visual person, if you are more of an auditory person, if you are a person who likes to read and see what it is that you are learning about or interested in, ask that person, that version of yourself, or bring to mind the vision it is, if what you want to do is right for you. And because you're passionate about it, it likely is. And then in that space, this is where it's so important to either journal, or in that time of thought, to sit down, journal what it is that you feel about yourself, these negative thoughts about yourself that tell you you can't. What are those thoughts? No need to judge them at this time, but write, what are those thoughts? For me, I was so self-conscious that I couldn't picture myself becoming a podcaster, but I had to, and it was through the work of understanding from other masters I learned, and also in my own meditation space, I had to be the one in control of the thoughts, the intrusive thoughts coming in, especially the ones about myself. So becoming more aware of that and the thoughts that are holding you back. And it's hard to hear unless you really have to hear them all, unless you are in that quiet space. I don't care if you are a genius. It's really hard to hear them all unless you are in that quiet space, to see and have that reflection of self-awareness of what those intrusive thoughts are. And then when you're able to declutter from them, really, it's exciting and it's scary, but take the small steps. Even you've got to take some action. The fact that you've become aware of the negative intrusive thoughts already increases your worthiness, your understanding of your worth, because you become aware of the negative thoughts and remember that those thoughts are not true. You really can paint this reality for you. So when you look at these negative thoughts and you remind yourself those are not true, and that is just a simple way to raise your worth. Even if you don't feel it at the time, even if you have to fake it, saying that those aren't true, you still have to remind yourself that those are not true. They're not true. You are what you envision to be, what you are what you are. You are what you say you are. thoughts are so key in everything. And we were talking about vibrations and frequencies, and the thoughts that we say to ourselves, that's really the biggest thing when it comes to raising our vibration or frequency, or just like allowing us to be present in a certain space that we want to show up in. And so you really are what you want to be. It's just remembering yourself and bringing that self-awareness in whatever form it is. Some people, like I said, it's writing, or it's envisioning, or it's all of the above, or reading something, but everybody has a different method of doing it. There are people that are like, this is the formula. There is no formula. Every human is so different, but it is so important to become just self-aware, and then you allow yourself to raise your worth, and I guarantee ideas will come to you and take action on those ideas. People forget about the action part, and that is important, but those are inspired actions. Those are inspired whispers, perhaps from your guides, perhaps from source, or if guide source doesn't connect with you, maybe it's just from your subconscious mind allowing those actions to come in. Yeah.
Wow. I love it. Go ahead, Brenda.
It's so funny, Raquelle, because we pull like quotes and clips and stuff from each episode, and every time you speak, I'm like, wow, we're gonna have a really hard time.
We're gonna have to pull the whole episode. She's gonna be a quote every minute. Like,
my answers are so long. I know.
We're like, it's amazing. There's so much beautiful, good stuff.
So much value, seriously.
Yeah, and I love what you about. I don't know. It was something that I had when after my really hard year, I kind of went on this like, I'm raising my price.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Those are the words on her fridge.
It's like on a whiteboard on my fridge. Like, it's hilarious, but it is funny, but it was very true for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so hard to realize how many unconscious thoughts we're having that are so destructive to us. Like, I mean, the amount of conscious thoughts that I have that are mean towards myself are a lot, and then and the amount of unconscious ones are even more. So it's I don't know how to say this. It's like, how do we expect ourselves to get to like a higher, better place if we're like letting all of that bog us down?
Ooh, I would say to not ever expect that it's not going to ever end. It's almost in a sense never ending, where especially when you are allowing yourselves to be on social media, or what, it's never ending, but you become more and more, you know how things become second nature at times. You become more and more conscious and aware of allowing and loving what is. And loving what is, and you're like, okay, this is simply just what it is, and I'm becoming aware of these thoughts. They might be a little painful, but are they true? Are they true? Probably not.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I think we talked about this activity in like one of our very first few episodes, but one of the things was exactly asking ourselves that question when negative thoughts do bog us down is what's true and not true. And doing an activity like that really does make you, it takes you out of that moment, because I think a lot of us have a tendency to get overwhelmed on a moment, and it almost feels like it's going to last forever. And Julia and I record at least once a week, especially together. And we're always like, man, we share basically our own versions of like a high and low of the week. And whenever we share something that feels like a low, the next week we're like, oh, I'm over that. But in the moment, it felt like so huge,
I mean, think about, do you remember your worst memory in high school?
That's a good one.
And it might have just like destroyed you.
Yeah.
It was the worst thing in the world. How did you let that go?
Yeah.
Some people are still working with traumas, of course. So I know that there's different scenarios.
Yeah, of course.
They can even probably think back to another time,
Totally.
So, yeah, there's always something to look back at. And there are, maybe you might think it's time, but it also could have literally been you let that go because you're everything shifted elsewhere. Your focus, your perspective of reality, it expanded in that way. You elevated your frequency from that kind of drama back then, or that kind of toxicity back then. And that doesn't even phase you anymore, but you're always still I still get faced with, everybody gets faced with challenges. It's like, because we're human, and we came to have this experience. Now, how are we going to show up, and how are we going to love what is, and understand that the darkness and the hard times and the stories that our mind might create for ourselves that make things just a little bit harder, even though that's there, it doesn't mean that you are not headed to, or you're not on the right path that you're supposed to be on. It has nothing to do with that. It's just allowing yourself to find more compassion for what is.
Yeah. Oh, Raquelle, you're so amazing. I could keep you here all day, but we've already been talking for an hour, so we'll get to our questions. I know, I'm like, we didn't even get to like have our thing, so you're gonna have to come back.
Yes, absolutely. So happy to.
Please, because this has been, I mean, it's honestly eye-opening, and it's a privilege to get to sit and like have a conversation like this with you. So really,
you guys, I'm really honored to be talking with you too. Oh, thank you.
So we'll get to our last couple of questions so we can let you go. But so let's go here. Do you have any, I'm like, I have so many questions for her, but I'll save them. Part two. Do you have any, I'm sure you do, daily practices, rituals, and routines? If so, can you walk us through some of them?
Absolutely. So I used to be extremely, I would almost say neurotic about making sure I was up at the exact same time and doing the exact same thing every day. And that was an old routine and phase I was in. And lately I've been more in a state of flow, though I still organically, because perhaps some things are just, now in my nature in some way, I do make sure to take some time to do them because they light me and they bring me back home. And so I don't have a set schedule anymore like I used to, but also I understand that I've learned this from Marin as well, because she has that set schedule, but that's part of her personality, right? And I'm more of a flowy person, to be honest, but I do still like structure. I do. I'm a 1990 baby. We're Capricorns in that way. I don't remember what sign it was, but like we have that sense where we need the structure. So for me, I definitely I feel my best when I wake up with the sun or right before, so I see the sunrise. And there are times when I don't, and that's okay. And I realize, okay, this is just a day where that doesn't happen, but I do feel my best. So that's part of my routine, is to wake up and be present with the sun, because that was the first time that I actually ever experienced presence, was like I'm talking about being aware that I was being mindfully present, was when I was watching the sun rise over the Indian Ocean and the moon set over the other end of the horizon.
Wow.
And it was such a beautiful present time. And so that's something that always brings me peace while I drink my coffee. Not tea, not anything. I want my coffee.
Yes. Yes. I love a morning coffee.
I need a morning coffee. I do. There are days when I'll feel like coffee's not for me, but super rare. A blue moon, they say. Once in a blue moon, I might not want a coffee. And then I love to read something. I just finished another book, which was more of a psychology-based book, and I mix it up. It might be psychology, it might be spiritual. And this one I just bought, Dolores Cannon, The Convoluted Universe.
Okay, amazing.
And I don't read that many pages because I'm excited to move on to other things. I mean, I would say maybe like 10, 15 pages, but you get there, like I'm being patient with it. And then I was sick and I was also doing other things. So I usually will move my body, but instead I've just been more mindful, and I make sure to meditate, but in my own, without noise. I think that's one thing for new people, new spiritualists, I should say. You were asking the people that are interested in this, do a guided meditation to guide you through this, to ask those questions. But then finally you can come to a space where you also just want silence and you don't want to do anything fancy. My meditations are not fancy at all. I used to do mantras. That's why I decided to be Raquelle Mantra on Instagram years ago. But now it's literally nothing fancy. I just, I'm just there. And it feels so at ease and centering. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then write a little bit. I really always like to document my day. Lately, it's been more digital journaling than physical journaling. And if I don't do those early in the morning, I try to fit them in sometime in the day or make up for it the next day. But I don't put pressure on myself to have to squeeze it all in.
Yeah. Wow, incredible. Yeah, we talk so much about the power of a routine of sorts, right? Like we also tell all of our listeners that there's no pressure to have anything specific. Anytime that we share anything about our own routines, which have evolved many times, we make sure to say like it doesn't have to be a gazillion steps, doesn't have to be even anywhere similar to what we do, but just something that feels like you're doing something that fills you up first. It just like sets the tone for the day. So I love those things that you do. And I think so many people that do share on Instagram, again, not everyone, but some people who share their morning routine do share like the very rigid thing. So I love that, yours is a little more free flowing and giving people that permission to have that.
And I also have to say, let's say I don't meditate a day, but I might be dancing to music that just gets me feeling good. It's all about just allowing myself to get some energy out of my body, or just feel good, and I love to dance by myself. I love it. And with friends, I love it, but that's just another thing. It's so important to, and if you decide not to do one thing that you are used to doing, also I actually recommend trying something different, spicing it up a little bit.
Yeah. Because to echo what Brenda said, like what I see as important of like a morning routine or a ritual, whatever it is, wherever it is in your day, is just taking the time to do something for you, not for that email that you have to answer, or for that person that you have to text back, or for that phone call that you have to make, or the deadline you have to reach. Like, it's for you. And that's the purpose of it.
Absolutely. 100%. It's for, especially, I'm a solo woman on my own, but I'm thinking about the mamas, they need some time for themselves. And also if you live with your family, you just need some space, or your boyfriend or friends, you need some time for you, or you have a crazy job. I'm assuming one of you or both of you had a job right before this, and that's why you guys talk at this hour, right?
Yeah, Brenda still has a full-time
job.
Yes,
so you probably crave some time for yourself. But look at you also showing up for your dreams and doing something along with, your job. And perhaps your job is also part of your dreams, but whatever it is, it's going to guide you 1000% towards whatever your ultimate dream is. And you're learning lessons from that. That is going to be so valuable.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I feel like we keep complimenting everything you say, but it's just like everything we need to hear. And especially when it comes to all of that, just like you said, it's so important to have some like me time. And even so, listen, I'm very much working on it. I struggle with being present, and I notice it. I really try to make those moments, but I feel such a sense of urgency all the time. So it's something we're working on, but you're so right. And I appreciate it. And to give you a little moment about your own podcast, you have so many incredible people that you get to connect with. Can you tell us a little bit about your show?
Yeah, Your Own Magic. It's been around since 2017. I started it with my friend Allie Michelle she's on Instagram as Allie Michelle. And now it's just, I'm the solo writer on it. And I've connected with a lot of my favorite authors that that helped me, were catalysts for my spiritual journey, like Byron Katie, like Gabby Bernstein. Like, there's just been amazing humans as well that might not even have a huge platform that have come on because there was something that, I talk a lot about being guided by my angels or guides, and somehow that was guided. And it's amazing how that happens.
Yeah, she gets the best guests, guys. So like, go listen to her podcast. She has so many amazing guests, so many amazing episodes. Raquelle, I can't thank you enough. This has been so incredible. We just have two little last questions for you.
Absolutely.
Now that you are 30, if you could tell your 20-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Ooh. Oh, and she was in such turmoil. She was in such a stressed out place. She was so unhappy with life, blacked out a lot of it. But I would remind her to not be so self-conscious and be more conscious about knowing that no matter what, she'll be okay. And those who, I know this sounds so cliche, but this is one of the biggest things, because we care so much, especially in our 20s, what people think of us, or early 20s. It's such a huge thing. But really, like, other people's opinions really don't matter. I held myself back because I just cared so much about what others thought. And if I didn't, you know, and I don't have any regrets, because it taught me a lot of lessons. And that's another thing as well, to not regret the lesson, because you learned a lesson, but they're not worth it. Those people that I was trying to impress then are not even a thought in my mind anymore. And so to not do something for anybody else, because, and this is the cliche saying, but those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. And it's so true, because there are people in my life that are still around, though I might be another version of Raquelle. They love me anyway. Yeah.
I love that. There's going to be many people that need to hear that.
I need to hear that today, definitely.
Yeah. And our last question for you is, where can people find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to learn more, all the things?
I'm pretty good at responding to a good amount of the DMs on Instagram at Raquelle Mantra. I do want to start a TikTok. I started a little bit of an account, but I haven't posted anything. I love it. I know. But yeah, so for now it's just Raquelle Mantra, and then you can also go to Your Own Magic, type it anywhere on whatever podcasting platform, wherever you're listening to this, where would they likely be listening to this? Because it's not on YouTube. I'm sorry, not yet. But
yeah, Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
Yeah, exactly.
It will be on YouTube as well. So
okay, amazing.
All over.
And we have a Facebook group that has a lot of very compassionate, understanding, helpful souls. Most of them are in their 20s, and they're trying to navigate life together. There's been like a siblinghood established, and it's just such a supportive community. A variety of different people come to share whatever their circumstances are, and there's nothing but compassion. And because it's such a beautiful community. So there's Your Own Magic Facebook group. But yeah, with me personally, probably Instagram.
Amazing. So I will link the show. I will link all of Raquelle's stuff in the show notes so you guys can go check her out and her amazing podcast. Raquelle, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. This was incredible.
You too. Oh my gosh. I'm just so drawn to both of you. Thank you for being so magnetic and beautiful and wonderful, and honestly welcoming as well. You made me feel comfortable, and it allowed me to be me. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Bye.